I joined 2 or 3 things that I love very much, but I never even thought of being able to connect them, or that it would be too crazy to connect them. Movies with philosophy, with economics. There's a beautiful, almost untreaded land in between. I think economics, after some while of studying, and if you study it for 15 years, like I have done it, or maybe even longer, it does tend to become somewhat boring. Well, of course, now we have a financial crisis, so we are not bored. And in philosophy, if you indulge too deep, it may be some sort of inflationary. You create problems that nobody else cares about. But if you kind of link these two together, or kind of find a path in between, this path is full of what I would call intellectually orgastic, explosive bombs, which I found fascinating. But I never had the guts to share them. This is also the book. It wasn't supposed to be a book. It was just my scribbling in the what I call the evening of an economist. During the day, of course, you behave and you do all the numbers and you answer the questions that you have no clue about, but they need to be answered. Somebody has to answer them. And in the evening, you might be wondering, what is it exactly that I, as an economist, or we as economists, are doing? Why are numbers so important? Why are we wrong, and yet people still listen to us? What did the old think, etc., etc., etc. So I was scribbling it, and never really wanted it, or what I never planned it to be a book. And the book that came out was a result. And what surprised me utterly is that many people found actually this approach, this crazy approach, as interesting as I thought. I thought this would be a book for a couple of economic punks. We created technology. This is the topic of Matrix. We created robots to serve us, to be our slaves, blah, blah, blah. At the end of the plot, we are the slaves, lying somewhere there, and the robots are using our energies from some. So it often happens. This is sort of the way to connect it with religion. Let's take the Christian and Hebrew founding story of the creation. God created human beings to be in some sort of relationship, and we've rebelled against God or gods. And now this history is a little bit repeating, or in our fears, we created robots. This is our creation to serve us. And in many of the fictions or horrors, they are actually rebelling against us and trying to. So they got a life of their own, like we got a life of their own, disattached from God. Often in this perspective, AI or iRobot or Matrix, or Ring in Lord of the Rings, it has a life of its own, an agenda of its own, in which we become subject. And how to connect this to economics? This is a perfect example with debt. We took debt in order to serve us. At the end of the day, in certain countries, for example, Greece or Hungary or Ireland, we are driven by debt. This is why we had this debate with the rating agencies. This is why they're so powerful. They wouldn't be powerful at all if France had 0 level of debt. I mean, rating agencies could be doing whatever they would want to, and it would be completely irrelevant. So we are servicing debt. We even say it, we are servicing debt. We've become, from a puppet, we've become a puppeteer in the hands of our own doings, which is the debt. So you can see how you can wonderfully connect religion with science fiction, which is modern myths, with economics. I think because the idea of science is to be disattached. The first rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club. The first rule of economics is you do not talk about good and evil. Now, why? Because we believe that it's scientific, and there these questions are physics-like scientific, and there these questions should play no role, allegedly, which I think is wrong, because every single purchase that you make, every economic decision that you make is in some way a moral decision. Who do I support? How do I support it? Who do I not support? How do I not support it? Well, how is the system? One of the things that was interesting is that we kind of put the morality or the moral responsibility into institutions. So now I don't really need to care for the poor. I have pension system to do that. I don't really need to care for the sick. I have a health insurance institution or the government to take care of that. And then when something goes wrong, we blame morally the institution. we thought that we can calculate everything very precisely, that we understand everything very precisely. And this is exactly what allowed us to go all the way to the edge. And then the edge moved a little bit and the whole thing crumbled. If you believe you have kind of tamed risk, then you feel that you can drive it much faster. When we should always remind ourselves that our models are just models, sometimes very similar to fashion models, and that they're not models as in raw models, that they're just abstractions that are inside of our brains. They're not in reality as such, they're just here. And if I want to convey them to you, I have to use a nice little story, and some people like to have a lot of numbers in their stories, and then they believe it. Others don't. So what has gone wrong is that we relied on our models too much, wasting our reserves away, which is one way how to read the crises. We really didn't create any reserves. On the contrary, we wasted them. So it was like, you know, eating all your food while food is plenty, and forgetting that there might be come a time of hunger. This is exactly what has happened with government budgets. We we sold stability and we bought growth. And we were so fascinated by this growth that we sacrificed stability. So the crisis isn't because growth doesn't materialize now, but exactly because we had too much of it, and half of it was artificially created by debt steroids. And so it's those sins of the past that are hunting us. I think this is sort of an economic application of Immanuel Kant. Okay? If you can't regulate yourself, if the market cannot regulate itself, then we have to have government regulations. I mean, sorry. If I would always produce and sell good quality shoes, then I don't need a market pressure and competition to force me into creating good shoes. If I have a tendency to cheat, the market should kick me out. If it doesn't, which can happen if the market is wrongly set, then I need a government regulation. I mean, and in certain areas we are ready to risk it. For example, this example that we give in textbooks all the time, the market of tea. There, I mean, if you don't like the tea, blah blah blah, it can stand pretty much alone. But how about the market of toys for children, or the market of medicines, or the market maybe of food? There, you don't want to test trial and error to see which toys are harmful for your kids. There you have to have a clear government regulations that you are not allowed to put, I don't know, toxic waste into, or dangerous chemicals into kids' toys. And it's a regulation. And we are better off when we cannot compete, and let's, okay, maybe you can put a little bit of more. No, none of that. But it's not harmful. No, this is the boundary we do not cross. Should it be here? Should it be here? And that's up to a debate. So, clear lesson is bankers cannot regulate themselves. Banks cannot regulate themselves as a whole in the market. So government needs to, I mean, we had a perfect opportunity to show to the world that we can regulate ourselves. We didn't, sorry. It is in our own interest to be regulated.